All right, welcome everybody to our latest Live Motocross podcast as we talk all things AMA Pro Motocross after High Point with Jason Thomas and Ben Townley. Firstly, thank you to everyone for listening and supporting the site. We really appreciate it. We'd also like to thank our sponsor for this one in Fly Racing and Firepower Batteries, who have excitedly jumped on board. Obviously, Fly Racing has aimed to provide customers with the very best in off-road performance products, led by the revolutionary Formula S Smart Helmet. Fly Racing continues to push innovation in safety to new levels. Never before has style and technology blended together so seamlessly as the 2025 Fly Racing lineup. For more info, check out flyracing.com. Visit your local dealers, follow flyracing.global on social media, and cheer for all their athletes in the SMX World Championships and in MXGP. Obviously, big shout out to Firepower Batteries too. Go check them out online and all their excellent offerings. Obviously, joining forces with Club MX and other heavy hitters in the industry. They've got so much to offer there, so go check them out. Obviously, firstly, welcome JT. How's life? And thanks for joining us from a pretty wild high point there.
Yeah. High Point was great. Things are good. I'm actually up in the Northeast. There's a really big like V twin, like what most of the world would consider just kind of Harley Davidson rally going on up here. So yeah, kind of checking that out as part of my role at Western Power Sports is V twin side and side by sides and all sorts of other stuff, snow and all these things. So I'm trying to branch out a little bit and learn a little bit more. So been up here for a couple days and yeah, enjoying it.
No rest at all, mate. Straight into it. But yeah, also welcome BT. How's life? And thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, pretty good, mate. Busy, actually, like a big string of racing going on for Jagger, my youngest son. He's got, we were in French Championship on the weekend, and we're going to Slovakia this weekend. It's 18 hours one way. Look, not looking forward to that trip. And then another French Championship, and then the World Juniors, which is only an hour up the road. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, busy few weeks ahead.
Oh, mate, that certainly is, isn't it? And obviously, we'll start with you, JT. We'll talk all things High Point, mate. I guess what made that such a cool round, pretty entertaining, pretty exciting as they all have been so far. But obviously, that sudden downpour in the final moto made things pretty difficult for everyone, didn't it? And I guess the decision to, red flag that early was all about safety, wasn't it? Obviously, not just for the riders, but the fans, for everyone. So it was a pretty wise move. And when you start getting things like insurance involved and anything that bad could happen, you really want to sort of limit the risk available. So it was probably the right call given the circumstances. Obviously, you get those wild theories that they called it once Jett got into the overall win. But yeah, it had to be done, didn't it, mate? Safety's paramount.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy, right? Like, and to be completely honest, we got really lucky most of the day. It was supposed to be pretty terrible weather. Honestly, Friday night and all of Saturday, and we did get a little bit of rain, but the track was honestly great. It was in great shape all morning. Qualifying sessions were probably the best track conditions of the year. And yeah, I mean, yes, okay, the final moto got pretty wet there. Probably wasn't a lot of fun, but when you're looking at the entire weekend as a whole, I thought we were really fortunate. So I will take it. I didn't have to ride in it, of course. I didn't have to clean up anything after, so it's easy for me to say that. But it could have been. There were black clouds around us so for so much of the day. The fact that we didn't get rained on several times prior was damn near a miracle. So, and as for the conspiracy stuff about Jett, the last thing they wanted to do was shorten the moto. That's not what they're there to do. But they have very strict rules around lightning within a certain distance of the facility. And once that is breached, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there's one lap to go or if it's the first lap of the race. If that is breached, they are stopping the race no matter what. So yeah, I kind of laugh, and it's not. They don't have all the facts. Maybe they don't even want all the facts. But yeah, these people that are running the races don't care who wins. That's not what they're there to do. They're there to operate and execute well-run events. So I think if anything, just great job of Jett of understanding the urgency, and the goggle situation all played in his favor. And it just felt like more of the same from this kid who really, whether he's intentionally doing it or not, he just kind of finds ways to be successful over and over.
I'm going to jump in quickly Ed, on this. I just can't. This conspiracy theory type of like mentality. So we're just this going to be a little bit long-winded here for a second. So bear with me. So a couple of weeks back, JT was telling us about, these people that just like getting stuck into them on DMs and the comments are horrific. And I sort of started reading some of the stuff that, from our last podcast together. And someone was saying that, like I can't even remember the wording they were using, like the way I talked about Deegan, like it must have been saying I was comparing technique, but I was just writing them off or something. And I started reading the comments and got me to thinking, like, with this conspiracy stuff here for this moto with Jett, right? Where is this? Did we not see this with society before there were comment sections? Because I just can't believe that people. How do people even come up with this theory in their mind? So before there were comment sections, did people think like this, or has it just made it a lot worse because people can sit on their little keyboards and just write these just random stupidity type of comments? Like it's crazy. Like to back JT up, like the people that think that they red flagged the race once Jett got into third, like you need to go to a doctor.
Yeah.
You're literally gone off the radar. Completely off the radar. And I'll just quickly carry on because I want to make a point. And I'd be interested to hear JT's point of view on this, but why do riders not, like Eli Tomac nailed Moto 2? Firstly, he looked around, like JT was saying, because I only watched the first two motos live and I had to go to bed, but like the black clouds, they were ominous. They were like, it was like to the boys during one of the, I think it was the first 450 minutes, like look in the background, like it's going to rain, which it didn't. But Eli went to roll-offs. This is my big point I want to make. Roll-offs on the start line. He said it in the press conference. I watched the press conference. I can't wrap my head around this. At that level of racing, let's be honest, it's a business. You go to the line, all these top guys go to the line to win, to make money. That more riders didn't swap to roll-offs and were prepared for it. And the way I talked about this with my boys just earlier before the podcast, said I was going to talk about this. And Jagger, my younger boy, said, like, at the end of the day, if it rains or it doesn't rain, you've still got good vision, but you're putting yourself in a better position if it does rain to have roll-offs on. So I can't wrap my head around that. And roll-offs these days are so wide. It's not like the old school thing that was, just a couple of centimeters wide. And but at the end of the day, at least that couple of centimeters, even when we raced JT, was more vision than running out of tear-offs and taking your goggles completely off your helmet. Like, that blows me away. And the last point I want to make is I heard Hunter in the press conference say that Plessinger went from a scoop tire on Moto 1 to a traditional tire for Moto 2. And I was just like, oh my God, like, that's the one time, like, we all know that if it's raining, you want a good start. Like Eli Tomac, it's easy to say this now in hindsight, but he had a better choice of roll-offs and a better choice of tire than Aaron Plessinger. He put himself in a better position to win that moto. Like, how's the decision-making happening, JT? I don't know. Maybe, am I seeing this wrong or am I on the right path? Or
No, your timing is amazing because I was having this conversation about goggles about an hour ago with Steve Mathis because he had heard from Dave Giannolfi at 100% goggles, and he was explaining that Jett had pulled one of the full 7-pack all at once, and that's why he ran out. And I was like, well, okay, that's fine, but in the same breath of that conversation, I would say, why did, maybe that's a lap. If it's raining and he's getting splashed by people, that's probably a lap worth of tear-offs, 6 tear-offs, 7 tear-offs, right? So
I'm going to confirm to the viewers or the listeners that is 100% one lap if you're getting splashed.
Yeah. So that doesn't really change the decision-making at all, in my mind. And I don't understand why they wouldn't, you explained it perfectly as you go with roll-offs. Best case scenario, it doesn't rain and you still are in the same boat you're in. Worst case, you have the best possible, setup, which is roll-offs, which is, I think, somewhere around 73, 75 poles or something like that. So you're effectively doubling or tripling your effectiveness that tear-offs are going to have. So I don't really understand the thought process other than I hear from riders that they just don't like roll-offs. Well, there are a lot of things I don't like. but I understand
Yeah,
that
but
they're
they
going to
like
give me the
money.
best chance of success. Yeah,
They
right.
like money.
Yeah, exactly. So what I would recommend or something like that is like in the future, if it's raining, maybe put roll-offs on in one of your practice sessions at home so you get more familiar with it. So when it's time to make that decision at the races, because what I think is happening is they're like, well, that's so different. I never ride with roll-offs. I'm going to be uncomfortable. I don't like it. Okay, well, ride a couple times at home. That's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. I raced with roll-offs all the time, especially early in my career, because we didn't have laminates. So you could maybe go 4 tear-offs before you couldn't see. That wasn't really an option. So I rode roll-offs all the time. Like it wasn't even really a big deal. And they were, like you were mentioning, really narrow and not very effective. But it was still
They were fragile.
yeah. Of course, yeah, the canisters would break. Like it wasn't a great option, but it was the best option, which I believe was still the same case, right? 30 years removed from me making that decision, it was still the same decision to be made. And on the tire, what I think about that conversation about AP, it's almost like these guys are looking for a reason to not use it. And I don't understand why they're searching for a reason. Like they keep coming around to what tire should I choose? Why are you debating
I
this?
don't even know why that's even a question. I really, at this point, well, I don't know why that's a question. Like, let's rewind the clock to Hangtown, okay? And the difference that the entire world knows about Jett Lawrence's first start to his second start is night and day difference, I don't care how good your electronics are or your technique. There is a fundamental difference in that tire for the start. And then if you're going into a mud race, which we're specifically talking about, like it altering your race finish, or it's a pivotal difference to your result.
Yeah, when I think about the way that American tracks are prepared, if this was Geldorf or something in Germany, okay, understood. Like I completely understand why you wouldn't want that tire, but the way American tracks are prepped, they're constantly watering, constantly ripping them. They're going to have deep sections no matter what, and the start is the deepest area of the racetrack anyway. Like again, I'm not riding the motorcycle, like so I understand like maybe it doesn't quite feel the way they want to, but just look at the facts. Monster Star Yamaha didn't decide for Justin Coop. Like they forced the decision. They said, you are not running the standard tire anymore. You are only running the scoop tire. They didn't do that because they were bored. They knew that that's going to give him the best chance of success in every scenario. That's why Eli Tomac only runs that tire. So this decision making of will I or won't I just don't think it's backed up by any sort of factual evidence to say it's going to have you get a better result. And in the end, this is a binary thing. Your result is either better or worse. Your start is either better or worse. And if the scoop tire is time and time again proving out to be the best of those, why are you even considering anything else? Like it doesn't really make any sense other than like the only pushback you could get is, well, I don't love the way it feels. Again, you don't like the way roll-offs feel either. You don't like the way the scoop tire feels either, but all of these things are going to get a better result in the end 9 times out of 10. So you have to do it anyway. So I don't know. There's no reason for me to be mad at it. It's more of like, I'm incredulous. Like I look at it and I'm like, why are you doing this? It doesn't affect me at all other than I just scratch my head and wonder why they keep making the same decisions.
I'm exactly the same as you, JT. Like I scratch in my head why AP went to the start line in the second moto with that weather on the horizon, and riders that went without roll-offs. I'm just talking specifically about thinking, how am I going to put myself in the best position if it really turns to custard, which is what it did, and it's you could say it's coincidental that Eli had a scoop tire on and roll-offs on, but at the end of the day, he won the moto. So, facts are facts.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Obviously, you see how much preparation and time and dedication they put into everything. So you'd think this sort of thing would be quite logical. Like you even heard Hunter saying that he was told the weather would be fine, and even though you saw the clouds, but that certainly wasn't the case. And then you sort of put yourself in a position to endure a lot of chaos if you just maybe played a bit more cautionary with it. So yeah, and I suppose that compounds things like that track, JT. It's tough enough to manage your bike when one moto's dry and when one's wet. And then you got obviously the goggles situation. So like you guys have just been saying, put yourself in good positions like you do during your training so you're ready for the racing. Make smart choices before you get to the line so you can actually condition your race in a positive way, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, there are ways to work around, because if AP was on this podcast and you asked him, why did you choose that tire? He would say, the base in several sections was getting really hard and I was getting a lot of wheel spin. So I didn't really have any feel and I couldn't be aggressive in those sections. Like I would almost guarantee you that's what he would say. Because I did walk out on the track quite a bit. In between every moto, I go look at it and just kind of see how things are developing. And it's a fair assessment of it. But in that same context, you can work around those things. Like the way they continue to work on the racetrack, the outside lines were still incredibly tacky. Like there were areas where, yes, if you wanted to use these specific lines, they were down to the base, but you could go 5 feet to the left and be in softer dirt where that tire would work. So adapting your approach to the race, knowing that this tire is going to have strengths and weaknesses, but overall it has more strengths than weaknesses, but you're going to have to make some adjustments as well. And I don't know if you saw it, Ed, but at the beginning of the show, I talked about how there's going to be insides and outsides, and you have to choose and understand which line's going to work. This falls under that category as well, as understanding what line your tire will work best for. Like that is also a conscious decision that riders have to be thinking through. So again, we could talk about this forever, but in the end, I just think it's a very easy decision that these guys are making very complicated for seemingly no reason.
I'm gonna put a bow on this. I listened to Ricky Carmichael's podcast this morning, and he said he would have chosen a traditional tire over the scoot because he said I could probably go a second a lap faster, because of the being able to take the lines and on the terrain that I want to ride on, or what would be the normal race line, right? And I was thinking to myself, well, yeah, that's all very well and good. But then I listened to Jett Lawrence I'm pretty sure this is in the post-race press conference, and he talked about that exact point that you just made, JT, is he was riding in the lines that his tire was what would you say, like it was helped him to create good traction in the lines and look for the ability to get that traction with that tire. So I totally support what you're saying. You've got to ride to the conditions of where you can get that traction. And you go back and listen to that press conference, that's exactly what he expressed and how he rode his race. Obviously he didn't get to start. I'm more specifically talking to the lines on the track, yep, and riding, to those conditions of where he could.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Obviously, you want to just get the best outcome, and then obviously you make your decision from there. So a lot can go on in your mind and in the mind of your teams just for you to get the best results. So yeah, that was pretty great conversation, that one. But yeah, I guess we'll just touch on Jett, like you said, JT and BT, the line selection with the resources available. Yeah, he was so good. He showed his skills in both sets of conditions. Obviously, the second moto didn't quite go to plan, but the bike skill, the decision making, the line selection was all there. We kind of run out of superlatives, don't we, JT, on these podcasts talking about him, but it needs to be covered, doesn't it? He's in control. He doesn't really get phased by much, especially on the track, and just handles himself so well and maturely in a sort of intelligent, disciplined way, doesn't he? I had that little weird sort of stall moment, but once again, he just got back into it and recalibrated his focus and just keeps winning these overalls in a pretty impressive way. So just your take on it from being there in person, JT, and then BT follow up.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing pretty much everything you'd want, right? Good start, bad start. He's making the most of what he can in specific situations. It doesn't really need a whole lot the results are doing kind of all the talking for him. I'm more looking around like, it's such an interesting dynamic because when you're at the races, everybody is so excited about Tomac. And again, Tomac won the second moto this past weekend. But then you look up at the end of the day, and Jett has pushed the points lead out yet even further. And it's this really strange thing where the championship feels like in the pits and like before the races start, like there's just this energy of the championship feels really tight because Tomac's riding so well, and he's won 2 motos now out of 8. But then you look at it and he's 20, I think he's 28 points down, and it's hard to wrap your brain around that because 28 points down is not really a close championship through 4 races. We're less than halfway and it's already over a moto. And so there's like this disconnect in my brain about what I think. Like every time the gate drops, I'm like, well, Tomac might win this moto. So that should correlate to like it being a really tight championship, but Jett is not really giving these guys any room for any inconsistency at all. And I don't know. It's a weird thing. Like he doesn't dominate races by the large gaps we've talked about. He doesn't have to just, cripple everybody, mentally and emotionally. But then you just look up and the points are going further and further and further away from everybody. It's a really strange way, super effective, obviously. But I don't know. I guess I'm just used to watching, like when Deegan's winning, the points are a little bit higher, but not a crazy amount higher. Like the points were exactly the same going into High Point. And the feelings of those championships to me are very different. Like Deegan is just the best guy in the class. Like I don't think you'll see Hymas the rest of this summer. I'm not a doctor, but I don't think you will. Deegan is clearly and far away the best guy in the 250 class. Jett is also the best guy in the 450 class, but it's like a tighter margin to Tomac when Tomac's riding well. But the points are like, if you were just a numbers analyst, you'd be like, yeah, these are kind of the same thing, but they don't feel like the same thing, if that makes sense.
So a couple of things there to note, like in terms of the margin or the feeling of it being a tight championship, and like you were saying, it seems like a really good buzz and energy in the pits. It's because the racing is tight. Like Jett doesn't win by astronomical margins like great riders before him have. Ricky Carmichael, Ryan Dungey, or like maybe Eli has it at times in some of his championships. But he is still winning most of the motos. And on paper, he's like I heard the stats yesterday, he's like in the top 3 already of, the greatest, or where he's headed already, in percentage. I think it was 45% for RV and 43 for Jett and 42 for RC or something, some around those terms. Like the numbers stack up so well. And I think in our brain, we don't connect that he is that good, but the way in which he's winning is not in this astronomical dominating fashion that we have seen with the great riders in the past. I think that would be fair to say. I also do think that if you go back and watch specifically those couple of laps on, obviously I only watched it from viewing on TV, but man, he can eat up a lot of time in a short amount of distance on track, So I personally believe, and this is always just like a contentious point, isn't it? Like what's his ceiling, what's his limit of speed? If you go back and look at that, and the same thing happened at Colorado as well, he ate up some serious amount of time in a short space of one lap in Colorado. He went from leading AP to being quite a distance behind him in terms of meters or feet, to then being back in front of him, all in the space of one lap. The same thing happened when he stalled the bike, and he was able to go from 3rd position behind Hunter to passing AP and do it in a very, what I would say, quick and easy manner, if you ask me. So I really think that there is more in the tank, and you have to think that he's only, if you look at the 3 riders that are at top of the championship, himself, Jett, Hunter, and Eli all came back from injuries, right? Well, Jett was the most serious of the 3. So you'd have to think that he's still gaining and will continue to gain confidence over the course of the summer. And also think back a little deeper than that, that the Supercross Championship was a write-off. He was only back for the playoffs, and he was injury in the Pro Motocross last year. So he's probably wanting to, get the ship, in the right direction and get it sailing smoothly, So that's certainly something to also take into consideration, that dominating in an enormous fashion is really cool. But at the same time, the checks cash the same at the bank, and they don't pay any more points when you're 40 seconds in front or 4 seconds. So that's my take on him.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see. And obviously, we move on to his brother Hunter, who was in position to get the overall. You'd probably say if they call the race early, they're probably favouring Hunter, so you can't win with these people, can you? Either way, a Lawrence brother wins, so it's a lose-lose with some of those fans. But yeah, another great effort by him. He deserves the credit. Closing the gap to Tomac in that second moto at one point until the vision wasn't so good. We've already touched on that. But yeah, the level's so high, and to come back from an injury like Jett's doing, obviously he's unheralded and goes under the radar a little bit more, and what he's doing gets overlooked, but certainly deserves the praise, and look forward to him at Southwick carrying that momentum, won't we, JT?
Yeah, this was a big weekend for Hunter, and this was a good track at a good time for him. He rides his track very well. It plays into his strengths. It just works for what he does well. He's methodical and pretty technically sound, and this racetrack rewards that. If you try to ride High Point, especially going back several years, but the same trends remain. If you go in there with poor technique and you don't understand the mechanics of how to ride, this track will penalize you. You'll just won't be able to find traction. You're always on a lean angle. So it's really hard to be aggressive because you can't really ride in the middle of the tire as much as you want. And you kind of have to understand, weighting the outside peg and all these things that are instinctual for riders at that level, but they are really critical for this racetrack. And I just think it works well for Hunter. He just can think through the racetrack, and you can't just blitz your way around it. There's too many ruts and you'll find yourself upside down too quickly. So going all the way back to 2022, when he and Jett battled all the way to the end, you could just see this track worked for him, and that trend kind of continues. And I think it was important just on a big picture scale for him to find that form again, reestablish himself amongst, Eli and AP and those guys, just because it felt after the first round, we went to round 2 at Hangtown. He was kind of off the back of those guys. He really didn't have much for them. Last week was a little better, but it just felt like he was slipping a little off the tail end of those guys, where AP was surging forward. You could really see him taking steps forward. Eli is Eli. We know what he's capable of. And Jett, we already know. For him to kind of reassert himself, he needs to be ahead of Justin Cooper. He needs to be in the fight with or ahead of AP. Like, that's where he wants to be. He wants to be that week in, week out podium guy. It's a really tough ask. And I just thought it was a big step for him mentally going into a break to remember, like, yeah, it's fine. I am one of those guys where a week off, if you have a rough round, like if Hangtown had been this weekend and he was really nowhere near the front, he couldn't see the leaders, kind of got dropped by everybody, those thoughts can easily get reinforced in a negative way. So I just thought it was a good race for him at a good time. And he'll be good at Southwick. I don't think it's necessarily great or awful for him. It's kind of middle of the road, but mentally he'll just be in a better place, I think, coming in.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Historically, they both showed there that's like their sort of, when you talk about going to stadiums, in certain areas for riders, that's it seems like a mental advantage going to High Point. But the one thing I will say, just again, listening to the press conference, is the setup for Hunter. Yeah, he did well at Parla. He did well there, but then it seemed like a little off at Hangtown, and he was kind of in the mix at Colorado, but it stood out to me that he was very comfortable by his own admission in the press conference with the bike. And there's something to be said for Hunter with that. He went through that very horrible string of injuries, and he's a very, like you said, JT, he's a very calculated rider, measured. He doesn't ride you barely ever see him ride outside his comfort zone and put himself in, in bad positions any longer than any further than when he used to, sort of when he had those injury ravaged years. So I think there's a lot to be said about him, and the comment he said about having that bike set up. They made a change, I think he said on Friday, and that sounds to me like they really broke through a new ceiling for him with comfort. And then lo and behold, we saw that on Saturday in the race, So, and I think there's one more point to add on Hunter. I think that fuels the fire for him getting beaten by his brother. The 2-2 score over the 3-1 and or 1-3 other way around. I reckon that fuels the fire a little bit, to be honest with you. And I think it needs to. Like he's always so complimentary of his brother, but it's time for him to stand up and shine. I want to see it. I'm definitely here for it, for sure.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out. JT, do you ever see a future when maybe Hunter goes to a different team? It's pretty hard to envisage given the closeness of the family, and obviously BT, you can weigh on this one too, but they seem like they're all just working as a collective to get the best individual results, and it's clearly a proven formula, and I don't think they'd want to mess that up at this point, but you never know, do you?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to ponder. I had heard at one point before the Chase Sexton thing came around with Kawasaki that they were pursuing Hunter at one time. I don't know I think this may have been end of last summer sometime. Cowie was just inquiring, right? Like find out if that was even a possibility, because Hunter was kind of breaking out and really showing that he could be a force to be reckoned with on a 450. And Cowie, I think they looked at Jason Anderson getting older. They had Prado coming in. So I think Jason Anderson's days were numbered there, kind of regardless, unless everything that they were chasing kind of didn't come to fruition. So I don't know. It'd be like in Hunter's heart of hearts, would he want to kind of stand on his own 2 feet, or would he? Like the one thing that has to be mentioned here, and why I question it, is that Honda team is super close. Like they are truly like family, and I think he enjoys that aspect. Is there's a lot of trust underneath that tent, and they all can lean on each other. There's not it's more than just they're going to work on the weekends with each other. Like they're kind of all in this thing together. And good or bad, I don't know. That's not for me to decide. The dynamic would change if Hunter went to any other team. The dynamic would change. Like, of course it would. Like they wouldn't be able to openly discuss the motorcycle and testing. And don't forget, Hunter does a lot of the testing for Jett. Jett will dial things in on a detail level, but Hunter does a lot of the broad testing to set Jett up. Like he did almost all of the motocross testing this summer because Jett was too injured to really participate. So that throws a wrench in all those plans too. Like there's a lot of things to consider there. What would Dazzy say? No, why would we disrupt this fantastic thing we have going, this family dynamic? We really work off of each other, because if your pace, Hunter, is a little bit off, you can absorb some from Jett, and Jett really needs your input with the motorcycle. And they really feed off of each other in these unique ways to basically be their best selves, right? Like, I don't think that the average fan watching, wherever is going, yeah, Jett is really good. And, a lot of this is due to Hunter being there to help him with the motorcycle when he's not sure what to do. I don't think a lot of people think that, but that is a real thing. And for Hunter being off the pace, he can, Jett is, I hear, around a second a lap quicker at the practice track every week. That's a great carrot to be dangled out there to chase every single day, because where else is Hunter going to find someone else that can beat him? Like there are very few humans on the planet that can beat him. So I don't know. You never know. This sport is funny that way. But there would have to be some long and hard conversations and some soul searching, I think, before you'd ever see that decision made.
No, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And for a few reasons. Number one, the dynamic there of what JT was referring to, like it's part of that program currently for that 450 program. And that's why, Jett it's a big piece or big component of why Jett is being so successful. And if you speak specifically to that point around, setting up the bike, They all know that. Dazzy knows that. Hunter knows that. Jett knows that. HRC, surely they know that. And that success of having Hunter as a teammate to assist in that that component is enormous for them, and the results they're getting with Jett. So no, the only way that he ever leaves there is because he's not getting the results that justify him being there, and that would have to be absurdly bad results. And then HRC would have to take a real hard think and go, if we get rid of him, are we still going to get the same Jett? And I'm telling you no, because of that whole dynamic, everything, all the components coming together there. So no, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's fascinating to have a chat about. And obviously, yeah, aside from what you guys have mentioned, just the marketing angle, the sponsorship, the exposure, it all just works so well with both of them, for Honda, for Red Bull, Alpine Stars. It's just a complete package. So I guess talking about people that the fans love, I guess AP, he's really proven that he's sort of risen to the level to be a real genuine front runner. Maybe doesn't quite have the, staying power to win races, but the speed, aggression, intensity is good. That goggle change was really cool. And would love your take on just BT's take as well. But JT, we mentioned about the nations. Do we just put Plessinger instead of Sexton, on merit purely because of the riding and he's putting the runs on the board per se? Obviously, it'd be pretty cool if you had Tomac, Sexton and Deegan, but it's going to be pretty amazing if AP's there, because they're probably the three most popular, riders amongst the fans, aren't they? Those guys, they just love them. So that'd be pretty cool either way for the USA at the Nations as well.
Yeah, I don't want to be the decision maker for Motocross of Nations, but surely AP wants to be there. No question about it. He loves this race. He was willing to go to France and get his teeth kicked in, knowing going on the front end, they knew they were going to get beat pretty bad. But he was willing. He just loves this race. I don't know what Mike Pelletier is going to do here, because I can't imagine that Eli or Chase Sexton sitting here in June can give him a real answer. Like the Tomac to KTM thing is going to happen, and the Sexton and Cowie thing is going to happen, but them working through the intricacies of it being out of contract or in a brand new contract when they haven't really had any time to prepare. It's right after the playoff rounds. So how does that factor into all this? Like, it is a really strange dynamic that we're going to have. And in the end, we're going to have people that want to be there and a really solid team. But working through that and navigating that circus is, I'm fascinated to watch it. I'm just glad I'm not having to make the final call, because you're going to have AP begging to be on the team. And then I truly think that Chase Sexton's going to want to be on the team because he likes this race. It's a home race for him. I mean, he grew up, 4 or 5 hours away. But this Chase Sexton, the one who seems very disinterested in racing, I don't think is a great option. If he gets back into it, we see him come back at Redbud and you see an engaged Chase Sexton, great. That's who I want on the team. I know he likes this race, but the guy who I think would rather be golfing than racing right now isn't that exciting of a choice for me. So it's going to be fun to watch. As far as AP though, specifically, I have a lot of respect for what he's doing to be able to elevate his skill set from where he was, say, a year ago. And he's made mention of this where, a year ago, these guys were 30, 45 seconds ahead of him. To be able to close that gap, be able to challenge them. And okay, sure. Is he there the last lap? Maybe not. But he's made a really, really big step forward. And I think probably the one person that's like wanting him to maybe slow down a little bit is Chase Sexton, because I think Chase would want you to believe that like the effort's not that great, the team's not that great, the bike's not that great. Well, AP is really putting his best self forward right now. And this leads into a really fascinating discussion on kind of how Sexton views what's happening with Jorge Prado. But specifically on AP, he deserves a ton of credit, win or lose, for the improvements he's made.
And there's a lot to cover on that little section, because Motocross of Nations is obviously, we discussed it a few weeks ago, right? It's going to be enormous this year in the USA, and like you've got the opportunity to choose from the creme de la creme for America this year. But I personally believe, this is, if you're viewing it right now, I don't think Sexton is going to be in good enough form to be selected. Like it doesn't sound like he's right now. If you just go off with JT's comment, and he's enjoying golfing more than he is riding his dirt bike right now. Well, I don't see him coming back in any just amazing form. And then if you contrast that with AP right now, he's riding the best he ever has in his career. So if we just talk Motocross of Nations, and JT might be able to confirm this or not, but I don't see Cowie wanting to take Sexton to the Motocross of Nations anyway. Clearly, Sexton doesn't want to be on a KTM, and that's a fragile relationship. No one's admitting it, but it's about as clear as Evian right now that that's the case. So I just don't know if Sexton is available at all, and either in form or on a Cowie. And Cowie haven't supported that race for a number of years, from what I can sort of see, or that seems that way. And then to speak, so I think it will ultimately, it could be easy. It would just be AP, Tomac, and Diggs, and I mean at the moment that would be the pick that you would make anyway. And that, to speak further on like AP and his form, I'm going back to all these press conferences in this pod, but he said somewhere that I listened to an interview or a podcast or a press conference. He said, my motocross form is going to be the best in my career this year. And I was just like, oh, yeah. I just took it with a grain of salt. Well, yeah, undoubtedly. And I don't understand where that sort of come from. Like, it's an enormous rise from where he has been, really, relatively speaking, if you compare him with Jett, right? Like, at times he's in the same conversation as Jett. And I loosely say conversation because then I just said a few minutes ago that Jett's got speed to burn, but he's racing within the lead group, and he hasn't really, that I can remember, he obviously was on the 250, but on a 450, I don't remember him being in the conversation like this. So, I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due, and I love what he brings to the sport, as a fan. Like I'm really, removed from it, just online and watching the races, and love the interviews. You just wait for him to walk up on the podium and what's he going to say. And I like the emotion too. That's like really cool. I think our sport's been long overdue to have personalities more to like what we have with AP, what we have with Deegs. I think we've lost it a little bit with Jett, maybe. Like, obviously tough. I wouldn't like to walk a day in his shoes, really. I'd like the bank account, but just the pressure that it would be with him. So I just like, I guess, getting a little off tangent with AP. It's just awesome to see what he's been able to achieve. And like I said, I didn't see it coming, and he did. So man, you gotta give the guy mad props. And just quite quickly on his okay, go ahead. We gotta talk about that. We gotta talk about that Thunder Valley press conference with that. You'd say that guy's name Hopper or Hooper? Is it Hopper or Hooper?
Yeah, Hopper.
Yeah. I think
that
that was awesome, man. I really commend that question. Like, I don't poo-hoo that question at all. And the reason why I say that is because I want to see that and hear that personality. I don't want to hear, how was your day? What did you think of your moto? Like it was, I loved it, and AP did a fantastic job of answering that question. It took us inside his mind and gave us like a snapshot of what he's thought about his previous teammates and what he's going to have with Eli. I thought it was fantastic. Awesome for the sport. That's what it was.
Yeah. My only issue with the question was that I don't personally believe that the genesis of the question or why he asked it was because he truly cared how AP felt about being teammates with Tomac. He was trying to get him to admit that Tomac was going to KTM in a roundabout way. That's my only issue with it. Because there's been it's pretty well known that he's going there around, but like everybody's trying to be respectful of Tomac's relationship with Yamaha. Like, he's chasing this championship. Like, so most people already knew. And if he could take a lie detector test and say, no, all I cared about was how did AP feel about this? Like, I all right, then I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. But I don't personally believe that was his motivation.
Yeah,
I
that
think he
wasn't
was
his
trying
MO.
to trick. Yeah, I think he was trying to trick AP into admitting it. In the end, I don't really care. I honestly, it has no effect on me at all. I don't really care. But I do want to talk about Tomac and going to KTM, because when you say Sexton, AP, or I'm sorry, Tomac, AP, and Deegan for those nations, in that dynamic, would you propose that Tomac, they do like a 1 week addendum to his Yamaha contract so he stays in the same bike, same team, same everything? Or because his contract will end, it'll change over October 1st, do you cram everything and try to race the new bike at that race?
I don't know, man. Like, I don't know Bobby Regan, but he seems the most American person that there is in the sport. And I see him being like, come on, boy, you can do one more
Yep.
week. That's
Yep.
what
No,
I
you're
see.
right about that. I think he would I definitely think they would take him if that's the route he wants to go.
Yeah, I believe they would. I mean, I could be very well completely wrong about that, but I don't see that being. How is that bad for anyone involved? It's good for the country, great for Yamaha still, good for Eli Tomac. Like it doesn't really. And on the other hand, I feel like Roger would roll the dice and give it a go. But
Yeah.
I just don't. I see the chances of it being on a Yamaha higher than on a KTM.
Right. Yeah, I don't know the politics of it, right? Neither do you, but like is Red Bull like, no way, man, we need this big introductory event for
Yeah.
Eli being, I don't know, right? Those are the only things I don't know. I knowing like Jeremy Millot at Red Bull, he's like the most laid back, coolest guy ever. Like I can't imagine he's going to say, hell no, like you got to do this right now and force everything and go in unprepared on a bike you really never raced. Like that doesn't seem like them at all. So I kind of doubt that goes that way, but it'll be fun.
I don't think that seems like John Tomac, thinking that's a good thing to advise Eli to do either, being his sort of manager and mentor as well, So I think the chances of it being on blue is far higher, but hey, I've been wrong before.
Right. I've been wrong today several times already.
Yeah, it'll be a case of watch this space. And just quickly on AP, JT, obviously you interview him quite often. I remember that was at Hangtown, wasn't it, where you said you have a good bit of banter with him, where he came up with the sleeves cut off and you said it's literally melted the sleeves right off him. And I guess it's pretty cool developing those relationships, and he's clearly comfortable with you, but he's a great interview. We say it all the time, but it must be fun for you to actually interview someone that's going to give you some pretty good content, isn't it?
Can I just jump in there? And can I just say, like, it must be fun to get your question answered in that sense with someone so dynamic, because I get frustrated when I hear you guys ask a question and then they finish and it goes to an ad or whatever, or Weeds comes back on, and I think, man, they didn't even actually answer 1% of what JT asked them. And I'm like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it is a little frustrating at times where, and I'll try to ask the rider, like, hey, do you want to talk about something? Because I will ask you that, right? But what I don't want to happen is me ask you about X and you start talking about Y, and it seems like we can't hear each other, right? Because that doesn't do anybody any good. But yeah, to your point, it is really refreshing. AP doesn't care what I ask him. He's going to answer directly that. Like, does not care where I go with it. And honestly, Tomac will do the same thing. Like if I ask Tomac something, he may give me a bad answer about it, but he won't completely ignore what I said, where Deegan will. Like if Deegan doesn't want to talk about what I ask him, he'll just talk about anything else. Like if I ask him about the start, he'll talk about the Oppo whip he did on lap 12 as his first comment and not even skip a beat. Doesn't care about anything. So your point is well made. It is refreshing when they actually like are engaging and like they, and I tell them like, hey, if my question sucks, just acknowledge it and move on as fast as possible. And then talk about what you want to talk about. Or better yet, when we're standing there both and you're sweating your ass off and I'm just waiting, tell me like, hey man, and Cameron McAdoo is the best about this. Like he is so good at it. He will come up and say, hey, I need to talk about this, or I really want to, this happened this week. I really want to talk about that. And I'm like, perfect. I'll get you there immediately. Right. Like that is to me, like the best possible case scenario. And in the end, everybody wins. I don't look ridiculous. The rider gets to say exactly what they want. And the person watching at home, they got to learn something like interesting because it was what the rider wanted to talk about anyway.
I have noticed that with AP and Tomac, like if you compare them, right? Like if you propose, something to AP, he expands on it in such a long form and gives you so much depth and color. And then when you do that with Eli, it's just like straight to the point, answers the question, whether he agreed or didn't or disagreed, it's just black and white with him. It's polarizing, those two and their personalities.
Yeah, and I don't care. A bad answer is fine. Like that's probably on me for asking a bad question. But when you just act like it wasn't asked, it's just really awkward more than anything.
Yeah, it's great stuff for sure. And obviously, we got to talk about Prado again, JT and BT. Obviously, there was that P1 in qualifying. You mentioned your frustration about that. JT was a timing issue. Obviously, it didn't really go to plan as well. He had arm pump. He actually got a pretty good start in one of those motos and dropped back. But when Patrell and Shock are getting him late, it's still not a good look. We thought it might get better after speaking last week, but all the indications aren't particularly great, and it doesn't really appear like there's much light on the horizon. To his credit, he's still, he's a true professional. He remains calm and about it all, but with the team and with his family and his inner circle, and frustration must be real. And then you talk about Kawasaki and the nation. Spain are going to have a really good team if, Prado goes. You got him, Fernandez, MXGP front runner, and then make your pick out of Ferez and Oliver. Podium level team for sure, potential win in the future. So a lot to consider there as well, isn't there?
I don't know what's happening over there. I do not know what to make of this at all. I didn't think it could get much worse. And then it was like a 12-23 type day, which Jorge Prado is one of the...
JT, let me
Please,
jump in, right? Because I listened to your podcast yesterday. I was running and I listened to that one with Weege and Steve. And you made that point, right? I'm just going to make this point. People know like how clear this is about. You said there's been 8 motos and he has had 0 hole shots. And you referenced it, correct me if I'm wrong, that there would not be a time since he has turned a professional racer up until Parla this year that he has gone 8 motos or 8 gate drops consecutively and not pulled 1 hole shot. That has never happened. You are 100% correct. In history, he historically is the number 1 starter there is in history. So I just wanted to give reference to that point that you made, because that you were bang on the money with that point.
Well, I appreciate it. And I wish I had more answers for them, because I would gladly give them to him, because I in the slang of American youth, they would say he's down bad right now. Like this is not going well. And I just, when I watched the starts, they were okay. Like he had a reasonably okay start, but that's a relative term when I'm talking about him. And
exactly.
in a relative sense, it's not a good start at all. And then I watch his pace, not good.
He got swallowed up within 3 corners. He'd gone from a clear second to 5th, 6th, 7th. I don't know. Like he never does that.
Yeah. So my frustration, Ed, when you saw on Twitter, was that so this is what we thought happened. We collectively as a sport thought that a guy who had been wildly struggling, had shown no signs of life yet, just somehow on the first time he's ever ridden this racetrack went 3 seconds a lap faster than Jett and 4 seconds a lap faster than Eli Tomac. And his sectors didn't reflect any of those things. That's where we landed on as a sport. And everybody thought, man, Prado finally showed up. I'm like, okay, I watched that lap.
That's because Ken Roxon said it's the most similar track to Europe that he's ever raced on. That's why, JT.
But he wasn't I know not everybody was there, so they couldn't see it, but he wasn't even on a fast lap so I'm like, I see the time pop up and I'm immediately thinking that they're going to take it down. Like it happens, someone pulls out of the mechanics area in the wrong timing loop or whatever. Like these things happen all the time and they just immediately disregard it. It comes down and it stayed up and then everybody's tweeting about it. I'm walking back to the podium for fast qualifier stuff. People are grabbing me going, Prado. And I'm just like, I'm going to freak out because this is like not reality. And then, no, did I expect him to be 36th in that session? No, I didn't. But like that was probably the funniest part of all of it. Was I was like, not only was he not, 3 seconds better than Jett and 4 seconds better than Tomac, he was 36th overall. So, I probably overreacted. I just couldn't believe that we collectively thought that this is what was happening. But none of that helps Jorge Prado right now. And I'll be quite honest, I don't know what will. I talked to Paul Malin last night for quite a bit, just randomly. We were just chatting, and I think, Ben, you're there, but the collective world who has watched this guy race a lot is all so confused as to what's happening. And, like Oscar Weirdeman, and they're really smart people at Kawasaki. I don't think that it's like a incompetence thing at Kawasaki. That's not the point at all. But somewhere, his mentally gelling with the motorcycle, switching to this Japanese chassis, different electronics package. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know. I just know somewhere here there is a gigantic disconnect between what this guy knows how to do and has done his entire life and what's happening right now. There's something really, really wrong.
It runs deeper than like if you were just to like analyze the first two rounds. What was that? Parla and Hangtown. You could say it was bike related, and you could point the finger more towards they need to get it in the ballpark more for him, right? You could have said that 4 rounds in, it runs way deeper than the motorcycle. There's something we either don't know or he doesn't know. I don't know, but it's unknown is what it is, JT. There's something wildly wrong. I think you made this reference point, or someone did. The guy on the Suzuki, Pat Rao, he's never beaten Jorge Prado on a 450. He hasn't even been in the same ballpark. He's probably been lapped by them more times than he's been on the same lap at the end of the moto by Prado. He got beaten by that guy. There's something bigger at play, and that may or may not come out on the wash. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, with everyone thrashed the hell out of this, we don't need to continue because there's no answer to that. I know you got to go in a second, JT, and I just wanted to ask you a couple of things.
Yep.
You're bang on the money recently about your comments about Hymas. Like, he wasn't able to show up in the same form 7 days later on what you could say was probably a similar type of environment, maybe not as rutted, but certainly, like you talked about, high points, a technical trick in a sense of the way you have to ride the motorcycle and work your way around it. And he wasn't able to show up in that same championship, let's call it, form that we saw in Thunder Valley. Am I right in saying that?
Yes. Yeah, he was really good, but I think the last 1% that he needed, he didn't have it. He was close. I think he was the second best racer on the day, but he wasn't the fastest qualifier. He didn't, he didn't lead any laps. Like, he just wasn't all the way there.
Yeah. And I think the big thing that stood out to me is when Hayden has a poor start, or let's say any championship contender, when they have a poor start, they put themselves back in the championship picture. They might not win the moto, but they certainly salvage third or second or whatever that may be. So I really thought, I was really curious, just based on comments that I've heard from, the likes of yourself and others in the industry, like what we need to see something similar to Thunder Valley to make himself in that championship picture. And you said it so correctly. At the end of the day, the championship doesn't have an asterisk that says, hey, Chance Hymas had food poisoning and he wasn't able to score, the most amount of points that he could have on that day. It doesn't say that, So yeah, I was really intrigued by that. And the last thing I want to ask you is this Kitchen. Like, it doesn't seem to me like we're getting what I expected out of him. And I find it really interesting, just the comments he makes on the podium, that he's not like, I'm want to get this one. I want to win motos. I'm here to win this championship. I just get the feeling the sense from him mentally that that's not really the game plan totally, or am I wildly wrong with making that statement?
Yeah, I think he believes he's a podium guy. I do think he believes he's a podium guy, but I don't think he believes deep down that he can beat Hayden right now. I do not think he believes that in himself. And there's an injury in there. Kitchen is kind of a finesse guy, and I just don't think when push comes to shove that he really wants confrontation with Hayden on that level. Like I've seen Hayden like pop off to him like in person, say stuff, and Kitchen just doesn't do anything. And like I don't know, I just think it's a personality thing where until he's ready to step up and kind of say like I am the guy, like you can go F yourself. I don't know that, because Hayden fears him 0% right now. Like he'll say stuff to him, do stuff to him. He doesn't really care. So I don't know. Like I don't like saying like Kitchen needs to be like add some toughness to it, but that's what I believe. Like I think he just like needs to like stand up and kind of believe in himself a little bit, because I don't think it's like a riding skill or a talent thing or anything like that. Like say what you want about Hayden, his TikToks and things are pretty ridiculous, but when it really comes down to it, that kid's pretty tough. Like when it really like you have to like look inside yourself and find some grit and determination, that kid is a lot tougher than I think a lot of people would want to say about him. And I really think that's kind of what's missing from Kitchen. Like this sport, when it comes down to it, like it's hard, man, unless you are willing to really, really have some backbone, you'll get run over. Like I saw Carmichael do it to people. Like if you show any weakness to guys like that, they will run right through you. And I think Hayden has already kind of proven that to Kitchen. So until that changes, I don't think Kitchen really has anything to fight with for now. Like I don't, maybe he thought he did at certain times last year, but I haven't seen anything like that yet this year.
No, and like, specifically to this season, as in this motocross season, just the way that he answers some of those questions and the comments he makes, I don't feel like there's that real just like tenacity in there to go after that win, and I was expecting that from him, like I really believe that, the form that he was showing in Supercross, yep, there's an injury in there, that's absolutely, but then we've seen that from Jett, Hunter and Eli as well to return from injury as well, so I don't know if I can take that into account that much, but just in general, it doesn't seem like there's that real sort of doggedness to actually, stand up and fight Hayden, literally fight him on the track to get those wins. And I do believe he has the capabilities as a rider to do that, but it seems just mentally to me that he's just not in the spot to do it right now is what I'm viewing, from here anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, you go. Thanks again, JT, for joining us on this one, mate. Been another awesome podcast. We'll do a little bit more BT, but yeah, thanks again, mate, and all the best with everything, and we'll catch up next week.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ben. See you guys.
Cheers.
See you, mate. Yeah, I was just going to say, BT, I believe on the broadcast they mentioned with Kitchen about maybe having a nutritionist and a mental coach, so he's making steps to address that kind of thing as well. But I suppose ultimately what you're saying, and JT, is it's got to come from within as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, he mentioned it himself, actually.
Mm.
Yeah, he listed all these people that he's working with, and that's fantastic that he's really investing in himself and wanting to be a better athlete. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to deep in those hot summer days, and points are being paid, that's when it really has to come to fruition. I don't think we're not seeing that happen right now, and be interesting to understand, where he's at mentally with that. Maybe there is still some hangover from the injury. Was it neck or back? And he's still working his way back to confidence from that. I'm not sure, but like Colorado, one of his probably best races of the motos of the season so far, he came from miles outside he was at the back of the field, to race his way all the way to the front. So it's there in him, but he's got to display that. If you removed Hayden from from this championship right now. And you talk about all the riders. There's no one that basically is putting their hand up. Hey, I'm the guy. I wanna win this championship. There's certainly no one that's saying I want to take this to Hayden whatsoever. So I think it's quite an interesting sort of scenario, not only for him, but for many of those 250 guys at the front of that pack there. And we just touched on that with Hymas, right? Had that all weekend in Hangtown, and I get it, had food poisoning at the end of the day. On Saturday afternoon, they pay out 50 points if you're willing to take them, and if you're not, you miss out. And that's how championships are ultimately won and decided. So, there's no one that's really putting their hand up, like I said, and saying, right, I want to have a go at winning this championship, and I'm going to do whatever it takes on Saturday afternoon to achieve that. And we're not seeing that from anyone really but Hayden, and that sense of like, right, I'm owning this championship.
Yeah, it's great insight there, mate. And obviously, you're looking ahead to these guys. They want to probably move up to the 450 class. Obviously, Deegan will probably be doing that at some point next year. Kitchen would probably be next in line for anyone, and you got to put the runs on the board to get a factory seat. You look at Marchbanks, he would be in line just given his size, and he's riding really well, but the starts are hindering him. Viala's obviously moving up to 450 Supercross. Who do you see in that 250 class as the guys that can, make an impact in the 450 class, which is what a lot of them will want to do on their career map, isn't it?
Oh, that's a tough question to answer. Like, no one just jumps out at me. I mean, you'd have to think just the two that would make the most sense right now would be Kitchen and Hymas. But ultimately, I just don't think they're ready for that right now. Based on just the form that Chance had in Supercross. I know coming off the back of an injury, but it certainly what I see in him as a rider and his capabilities with his skill sets, my expectation of what his ceiling and what he's capable of achieving on a Supercross track is far higher than what he's actually achieving. Like if you look at, he got one race win this Supercross season, and it was a little bit of a gimme in a sense. I mean, that's pretty rough to say that, but considering the conditions and whatnot, he didn't certainly come out of the blocks in a standard Supercross and show us, what I think he's capable of. If we, compare that win to maybe lining up at, say, Anaheim in the best conditions, where you really have to show your skill sets to win the race and execute. But haven't seen that from him indoors. Levi we have, but I feel like with Levi we have now for 2 or 3 years, but it's hit and miss. It's not consistently achieving what, again, when I look at riders and analyze them, the capabilities of it, So yeah, but no, it's a hard question to answer because there's a lot of good rides currently being occupied in that 450 class, right? It's fairly well stacked. You only have to look at that, when the gate drops and you see the two Hondas up front, there's generally always at least 2 Yamahas in the mix. So there certainly is. I know Cooper's not really showing any motocross form or what if you comparatively speaking to what he does in Supercross, but obviously Eli's up there, Justin Cooper's up there. Anderson, I'm not sure what to make of that. I don't really know if he's in any form. Prado, we've clearly tried to come up with any theory under the sun of what's going on there. KTM have usually got 2 up there in the mix. I've got 1 at the moment because one's not even on the track. Husky, have sort of they're just on the verge of that top 5. On the outside looking in. So 450 riders are, there's no one saying, hey, here's my seat, my days are done, so it's not going to be that easy. You're going to have to, I guess the point I'm getting to, if you're Levi Kitchen, for example, you're going to really have to stand out to actually take one of those seats off one of those current 450 riders, really. That's a long answer.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. You look at guys, RJ's done a pretty good job of it. He's experienced. Jake Hoop's done a good job of it in recent years, making that step. That was a bit of a gradual transition. But I guess you look at Hunter Lawrence, the step he's made, that's so impressive. That should be put into sharp focus of how to step up so successfully, even though he's had injuries thrown in there. But, listened to that Gypsy Tales podcast Hunter did, and that was a really awesome insight into, the current version of Hunter Lawrence and, how mature and disciplined and focused he is and how he also takes things in his stride. But that they're putting in all the work to make the best athlete and to sort of just channel so many energies into doing that, but also having a little bit of a life outside of it as well to try and enjoy those times too, because, the environment they've built for success, the compound, having the great team around them. Obviously, the agent stuff was not ideal at all happening earlier in the year, but that's sort of been talked about enough. But just really cool to see how far, they've come. And you obviously were helping them out when they first moved to Europe, and he gave you some pretty cool, nods of credit to that and how beneficial that was. So from you, it must be very satisfying to seeing how far he's come, not just Jett, but Hunter especially paving the way.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think probably the biggest thing that stands out there to me is just the point that he got to through that string of injuries, and I guess the decision to continue or not, and how close that was to not to continue racing as a professional. It's really interesting to hear that insight. And I think that's like, I guess, sort of going off tangent slightly, but that's what's really cool about the long form podcast world these days, and being able to hear the insight into those, those scenarios that athletes or anyone in that, anyone for that matter, but certainly like, I listen to a lot of athlete stuff and hearing those scenarios and where he got to, and to see now where he's at in the current form and what he's been able to do on the backside of where he was in those tough moments. I think it's a real testament to him, and being able to, we talk about a lot about teams. We're in an individual sport, but you have, if we speak specifically, his mum and his dad, and he works with his dad closely on a daily basis. And Johnny O is obviously, in there, guiding them, mentoring them. They've got a great team there with their race team as well, and the setup, like you said, with their training facility and whatnot. And so the environment they've set up for themselves, it's not just a coincidence that they're able to achieve what they're achieving, But the point I was getting to, at the end of the day, you're an individual and you have to put those results on paper every Saturday, and you have to take ownership of that. And so when he was at those dark days, he only one that was getting himself out of that was himself, So a lot of credit to him, for being able to get to where he is now as an athlete, out of those dark days for sure. Pretty cool story.
Yeah, it was great insight. He obviously said, living in the Sunshine Coast in Australia, if it was raining, they just say, we'll ride tomorrow. It's all sweet. Wait for it to pass. But going to Europe, like you've obviously lived it and you're finding out now your sons are, there's no sort of waiting out those days. The European weather's pretty erratic and you just got to get out there. And I guess it builds tough character, all that suffering that I guess goes on both personally and in your racing as well. It certainly is pretty cool to see that that's obviously hardened him to battle hardened athlete and a racer and a person. So all those experience you live through, they're probably not that fun at the time, but you come out the other side of it. One, obviously a better athlete, and two, super grateful for where you are able to be.
Yeah, and absolutely every athlete goes on their own journey, right? There's not just that one path, and especially in our sport, I guess that's what I still find fascinating about our sport, in the sense that it's man and machine, and it's a 50-50 equation in that sense, from the athlete to the machine, which, and generally in motorsport, that's not the case, certainly, and certainly not in a lot of other sports is that the case at all, So I think that's really unique in our sport, in a sense that you can buy a bike from a dealership anywhere in the world and pave your own path. And that's, I think, hearing these stories of how riders do it and what they achieve, I think it's really, really cool. That it's a great time to be alive, in that sense of hearing those stories and being able to see them, or we don't just hear them, we see them as well through the capture of film. And it's pretty cool, very cool.
Yeah, and obviously a couple more before we sort of wrap up, mate. But obviously, you mentioned the Junior World Championships coming up. Is Levi, is he going to make it for that, mate? And obviously, just tell us a little bit about New Zealand as well. And obviously, the Australians will send a pretty strong team. Ross Beaton, I'll be over there with them. So just your take on it, mate. How good a platform is it? It's a really good sort of gauge of just the elite talent across the world in motocross, isn't it, mate? The level's crazy. You're seeing it every week with your youngsters, aren't you?
Yeah, the level is very high. It certainly is. With that being said, though, you've got to look back, just only rewind the clock, say 13, 14, 15 months maybe, and if I just talk specifically of how to give that some context, Levi was racing in Australian events at that time at the Pro MX. They had, I think, 3 rounds last year. We had one in Gilman, and I can't remember where the other two, one in New South Wales somewhere, and then Levi went on to win the World Championship. So I do speak very highly about the level of the European National Championship racing. We were just at one on the weekend. And Jagger raced there. He was in the 85 category there, and it's like the French Championship is stacked. Like when you see the names at the top of the sport currently in this current times, and you'd have to say that like there is quite a large percentage of French names at the top of the sport, whether it be in MX2 here, MXGP, or in American racing scene. That they've got a fair percentage of them. But you can see how that starts, because at the race I was at in the weekend, they call it espoirs. I think it means hopefuls, which is the next generation of 85 and 125. And just to give you a little bit of insight there, Jagger had a 20-minute free practice, a 20-minute time qualifying session, and two 20-minute plus 2-lap motos, essentially just under 25 minutes, right? So they're just breeding them in that environment. And that's, I guess, again, just sort of switching back, that's what has been so good in Australia, and what Levi was able to be involved with last year, and then essentially went on to win that World Championship. And I think just the biggest thing, the difference, I guess, for me is just population, right? There's however many million here, and so when you're on a start line, there's just a bigger percentage of riders at that speed, and it just breeds competition, and through competition, the cream rises to the top, right? So, yeah, interesting process going through with Jagger. Like he's riding really well from what I see. He's growing. He's meeting all of the signs during the weekdays, without a doubt. Can see that. But then just weekends, with that depth of competition and the level of racing that we've been at, I don't feel like we've seen what I've seen during the weekdays, and on the weekend he really was able to rise up to that, and that was really cool to see him achieve that. And just, I guess, what specifically what you're asking, just the level of racing here is super high, and they're very extremely fortunate. I mean, Jagger is very fortunate to be in this opportunity off the back of what Levi achieved, and what that has led us to come and do this year. So it's quite mind-boggling, really, to like think of how this process goes, and the lengths that you have to go to achieve racing at the highest level these days. But that's just part and parcel, I guess, with what they want to achieve, really. And to speak specifically about that World Championship, it's at a really cool track. It's an awesome facility, massive jumps. Like some of these kids that are going to come there are going to be like, whoa, there's two there. Jagger on an 85 is absolutely wedged in fourth or fifth gear, or maybe fifth gear on one of them. It's like through the set of rollers into this triple step up, and it's like you get in an elevator and then go up about 5 stories, and then get out, and that's what it's like, a fifth gear wedge. And then there's another huge finish line jump, massive. It's big. Like I don't really get too intimidated with or concerned when the boys ever ride, especially not even Supercross. But this jump it's huge. It's like this massive step down. So it's definitely going to open some eyes of some kids, that's for sure. But just in general, the effort that you could see, and we went to ride there back in March, I think, when we first arrived, and the level and effort that they were putting into preparing the venue. They already have a great track, but just preparing the venue and getting ready for it. I'd say it's going to be an incredible event, and New Zealand's going to have a few riders there. Levi, unfortunately, won't be lining up. He had an X-ray last week and still got some healing time with his fracture. So, yeah, he won't be lining up, and most likely will only compete at the final EMX round now, or if that all goes to plan, unfortunately. Jagger will be racing, and there's a couple of other Kiwis that are going to be lining up in the 85 class and 125 class. We've got no one that I know of in the 65 category, and been chatting to Roscoe a little bit, and he's bringing the team over. So he's got riders, a couple in the 65, he told me, and a couple in the 85. So yeah, that'll
no
be cool.
125s, is it?
No. So that'll be good. You know, he was extremely helpful last year for the New Zealand team. Ross was, you know, and I've reached out and tried to return that favor. You know, now that I'm over here, I didn't know what I was getting myself into last year, so he was really helpful. And yeah, so looking forward to that event. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, mate. Obviously, you're off to a big trip to Slovakia this weekend for more racing, mate. And how beneficial do you feel these races are? Obviously, you've mentioned it, but obviously, Jagger's making great strides in his development, just being exposed to the level of competition, the tracks, the weather, the schedules, everything. It's all building a good athlete, isn't it?
Yeah, weird. It's a weird scenario over here in one sense. So, like the French Championship's super strong with most, like Jagger's the only, like you call it, international rider outside of France racing there, and then we've been in Holland, and obviously the Dutch riders are really good. They do have a couple of German riders. There's certainly some Eastern Bloc riders, Latvian and Estonian, that do that series. In Belgium, that's really was only Belgian riders when we were there. And then can't really comment too much on the Italian and Spanish, but the point I'm getting to is they don't all race each other very often. Actually, from what I can gather, it's only 2 races a year. It's the World Championship, and then what they call the EMX 85 final, which is at Lockett at a round of the MXGP. And to get there, you have to go through a similar sort of qualifying process to Loretta Lynn's in a sense. You have 3 qualifying races, and we're in what's called, I think, the northeastern zone or northwestern zone. I don't know what it is. And they did 3 races. Jagger did 3 races, one in Denmark, one in Germany, and another in Holland. And then you go to a semi-final, and that's in Slovakia. That's 18 hours drive from here. And so we're doing that Thursday, Jagger and I. And then they bring 2 regions. So they have 4 regions. So they bring 2 together as a semi-final, and then you go to the final in Lockett. So yeah, I find it a little bit bizarre that they actually all only race each other twice a year, which, just like considering obviously the depth of competition, I would have thought that they probably would do that maybe more often, but certainly not. Yeah, it's not the case at all, actually. Yeah. And like Jagger has really sort of had quite a broad range of racing since he's been here, but no one else really does that. And I guess it's because it's just so strong in their own backyard. It really is like that, you know? So yeah, really interesting, that part of it.
Yeah, mate, that's super cool. Yeah, it's certainly a lot of traveling for you, mate. Wonder what the track in store holds in Slovakia, mate. I'm not sure if you got the insights there.
Yeah, YouTube's amazing, for learning and it's incredible. GoPros, and riders these days know the track before they get to with YouTube. Literally, it looks really cool, super cool venue. They've had, from what I understand, had these semi-final rounds there before. So they've always, if you go by the event they hosted for what looked like a national championship round in March, which is on YouTube, looks like an awesome event. When I say event, the way they run it, the standard of the sponsorship and advertising, the track prep. They got those metal start lines, just like MXGP, big structures over the track for advertising. Yeah, it looks cool. And the track's got some awesome jumps, like really cool looking jumps. So yeah, Jag's looking forward to going there. And the soil, it's quite sort of clay-based soil. And that's Jagger's favored soil as well. So yeah, he's in good form as well based on what I saw on Sunday. So he's really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's cool, mate. Obviously, it looks like a good sort of breeding ground to make these youngsters into professionals, just the whole framework surrounding it. And I guess lastly, I actually wanted to talk to you. Obviously, you worked with Deegan, but like you're looking at his performance on the weekend, perfect bounce back, even though the 2-2 really wasn't that bad at all. But the lines he was taken, Brian was mentioning how he's really worked on it, but he's also got quite a good sort of level of creativity and reading of the track as the race develops. And, he works out a pretty fast way to negotiate that track, doesn't he? You see the skill set that he's developed, more standing up, more precise. And then you blend that with the aggression intensity. It's pretty formidable, sort of lethal weapon. So if he can really get those starts super consistent, the sky's the limit. But he's really becoming that complete package and he's still so young. So just wanted to get your take on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt he has, almost full package there for sure. If we go back to, some of those comments I made um, recent weeks just around, small areas that he has to work on, those are the areas that will certainly be identified when you're coming up against the likes of Jett. And, if we just isolate starts, for example, right, like just as one isolation point, he's got some work to do because it just, when you go into a 450 and you make small errors, they're identified even further, in that sense. So, I mean, he's doing his homework. There's no doubt about it. Just the small time that I did spend doing some work with him on his technique last year, and um, in person, I did it over a length of time online, but just in person, they turn over every stone, and they don't just turn it over once; they turn it over a couple of times and look at every facet of what he's doing. And although there's this, I guess, persona that they portray, they're certainly, really looking at achieving the results that they're wanting to achieve. And I mean, we're seeing that every Saturday now. And I think that this summer will be an important one for him to really, like you said, complete the full package, which he is doing consistently now, and really to look forward into moving to the 450 category. That's the premier class of our sport, and expecting to be competitive immediately, you need to have that full package. That has to be the case. Expecting him or people or fans or the industry expecting him to be competitive, if he didn't have that full package like you're talking about, be a little foolish. So I think what you're seeing now is starting to really tick all of those boxes, and you're gonna need to. The level, of what Jett is setting as the bar now is really that high that you have to be able in the position to really look at what you're doing, go back, work on it during the weekdays, and then come to the race and see those gains. You only get 50 odd minutes, or what is it, 60 odd minutes, to do it outside of the practice and qualifying. When the gates drop, and that's when it counts. And ultimately, that's what he's so good at doing, is when that gate drops. I guess the factor that I see the most there is I'm conscious of what I say for these keyboard warriors now when I'm talking about it and how I articulate it. But what I see are those real finer details that are probably not at the same standard as what Jett. I'm comparing him to Jett, right? Because he's the current 250 points leader. Jett's the 450 current points leader, and that's where ultimately Hayden wants to be, right? So then if you work backwards, how does he get there? And just talking about some of those real specific, intricate details of what I believe he could improve and should improve and probably needs to improve. The one thing that really outweighs all of those intricate details is the tenacity, man. The kid's got it in masses of amounts of it there, and we do get glimpses of that just, with the whole YouTube channel thing and what you see behind the scenes. And they're not afraid to show, pretty much this exclusive of who he is as a person, and I think, that's really cool especially for the younger generation to see, I'll be honest, like I was sort of against my kids watching that to begin with. I sort of looked at Brian as this freestyle dude, just like off to one sort of radical scale. But then when I really sort of started to watch some of it and see, the journey they're on and the way in which he's mapped it out, and I guess that would have been later in the Super Mini days when I started really paying attention to it, and just the way that they had mapped that out and what he was doing, at his house at home, and working with Rhino, and then he put the wheels in motion to go to Star and all of that. So I guess the point I'm getting to is that constantly Brian is just always looking at how to be better, how can we improve our program to be the best. And then I saw the inside of that, and that is certainly the case, so going to be pretty interesting and mouthwatering, when he lines up at Pala next year, which will certainly probably break people's keyboards.
Absolutely, mate. He's got those intangibles, doesn't he? Which you can't necessarily train, focus on that. He's just got it, doesn't he? And
bang on. That's bang on those intangibles. And that's what I'm talking about with that tenacity. Yeah. If you've got time, go back and look at their YouTube channel, where he walks up the hill to the podium and he's around the back under those tents, and listen really carefully to what he says to his dad. It's like, whoa, that's strong comment.
You put yourself in a position where you can, after the race, get a private jet home and start the recovery immediately. So you sleep in your own bed. Sunday morning, you wake up and you're already in recovery mode. Monday morning, you're back into the grind of things and you're training ready for the next week. Whereas a lot of the dudes are stuck at airports and whatnot. So he's just gaining that separation all the time, even immediately as soon as the race finishes. After the press conference, Brian's got the car loaded. They're ready to go. There's no wasted time, is there, mate? And that's what it's got to be. It's a smooth machine, doesn't it, mate? So it's pretty cool what they do. You get those insights too on that channel.
Yeah, it is. I think it is really neat for everyone to be able to see that. It's crazy to think that there's not much that we don't see in a sense in their life. It's a very crazy different way of living, but it's on the flip side of that, for us to be able to see it, as fans, is really, really cool as well. And a lot of learning can be done, from a lot of aspiring riders in the next generation, from that as well, if you look at it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And before we wrap up, any sort of final thoughts for you? It's really great to get you and JT on just to break down the racing and, have these conversations, mate. It makes for great listening, mate. But yeah, look forward to, anything you want to add?
No, not at all. I really enjoyed it. It's I'd written some notes, today when I jumped in about those roll-offs and those scoop ties and kitchen and Hymus, those sort of questions that I posed to JT in a sense, and just to get his, because you and I are just sitting there from our armchairs watching, right? And but he's right there in the thick of it, and certainly would have a lot more understanding and detail around those points. And that's why I think just looking from afar, when I'm able to pose those questions, it's really interesting to know what is happening, real time. And that's, if we go back to that roll-off thing, for me, that was just, crazy decision making in a sense, knowing that if we now look at Eli being able to have his goggles on the entire race and have great vision, so just, I think it's really, I hope for, the listeners and viewers of this that hear some insight, that they probably wouldn't normally, hear, because we don't really cover a lot of topics, like JT's, he's obviously got a fairly full plate because he's either only got 40 minutes or up to an hour, and then he's off on the next score, so it's really cool to be able to have those conversations and go in depth with him, and he's got a really good perspective on some of these topics that we talk about. And I guess, like I was just making the point of, we don't cover that many topics, but I hope that we get into the detail that, people can get a good understanding of, and we can offer, some really, good insight into them understanding what we see, and hopefully what's pretty close to, I would hope, is close to reality. Yeah, but some people don't see it that way, clearly.
Yeah, mate. The analysis, the attention to detail, the insight, it's really awesome. It's invaluable, and you get it from, having lived the careers you guys have done and been at the races. So look forward to it continuing, mate. And obviously massive shout out to Fly Racing Firepower Batteries for sponsoring this one. Really appreciate all they do. Obviously go check out their websites, check out their social medias, and get buying. So all the best for the rest of the week, BT. Been another awesome chat, mate. We look forward to doing it next week.
Sounds good, mate. We'll see you then.
No worries, mate.